So Cassie R, can you do a growth comparison from year 1 versus year 2 of CJ Stroud at Ohio State and talk about what you expect to see out of Julian in that? I'm not sure how much better CJ got in year 2 at the things he did best, because he was so good by the end of year 1, which is the thing that I was kind of reminding myself with the Michigan State game. He still played well in that Michigan game. Like it wasn't on him that they lost to Michigan in 2021. And then the Rose Bowl is just insane, right? He made the throw, right? Yes. Ryan Day said holy yes on the touchdown in the corner to Jackson Smith and Jigba. They showed him on the sideline.
Which one? Yeah, yes, I think that was that one. Yeah, like the over the shoulder one. Yeah.
So they're like rewatching that, and then like just statistically, he was still great, but he went from 4,400 yards to 3,600 yards in year 2. He went from 44 touchdowns to 41 touchdowns. He went from 71.5% to 66% completions. Part of it was that he had Smith and Jigba and Olave and Wilson his first year as a starter, which is just ridiculous. CJ Stroud, 27 big-time throws, 12 turnover-worthy plays in year 1 as a starter. Year 2, it was 29 big-time throws and 16 turnover-worthy plays. So, and then I think the running was more of a year 2 conversation, right? Because it was like the next step of playmaking, and then that's why that Georgia game was sort of the culmination of he was as efficient, as accurate, as poised in the pocket as he always had been through. He had, again, probably had like the first month of his career, before the game he sat out with the shoulder thing and like resetting himself early in year 1. Then after that, and then all through year 2, like the last 1 2/3 of his career was, most games were pretty the same, which is this guy's going to pick you apart. And then he sort of added that last piece of playmaking against that Georgia defense in 2022. But I actually don't know if he was a ton better in 2022, because I think he was pretty much almost the version of himself that he is now by the end of his first year as a starter.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think he was a little more aggressive maybe in year 2. Like the turnover-worthy play stuff was up. His average depth of target was up slightly in 2022. I do think like losing Jackson, obviously, of course it would, like brought the numbers down a little bit. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I would say, he had a good command of the offense. I think in 2022 he was probably doing some more stuff outside of the pocket than maybe he did in 2021. I remember there was a play in the Notre Dame game that opened the 22 season where he like got outside of the pocket and threw a ridiculous pass to Mayan Williams on the sideline. That was like, whoa, I didn't know you could do that. So I think there's probably some of that in his game from year 1 to year 2. And then he like broke out of his shell running a little bit. Where it really came to kind of like a fever pitch was that Northwestern game where it was super windy and nobody could throw the ball. And we're all watching the game going like, why isn't the quarterback running? You have to run the quarterback in this game. And then he finally did. He ended up with like 75 rushing yards in that game. I think a chunk of that on one long run. But there was like, they were just like running into a wall. And then they're like, you know what, CJ, why don't you keep this one? And then he kept it and he ran for like 15 yards and no one touched him. We're like, see, that's why you're supposed to do that. And then obviously in the Georgia game, he had the scramble. So I don't know. He was so good his first year that I think it was hard. It was going to be really difficult to statistically improve. But I do think if you watch him and some of the throws he was attempting, some of the throws he made, some of the more athletic stuff he was doing, there was definitely growth in the second year.
It's hard because, again, like rewatching the Michigan State game and the Utah game at the end of year 1, part of it, I guess, is he has 3 first-round receivers, but Julian Sayin had 2. And part of it is like, okay, these defenses aren't Indiana and Miami. And so he's just hitting everything against Utah and Michigan State. And you just feels like you've never seen a quarterback be more in control. And so after watching the Michigan State game, I was like, okay, like CJ Stroud at the end of year 1 had achieved a level of control and command and confidence that Julian Sayin didn't get to. And he's just a bigger guy in the pocket. And he just has that throwing motion that stands out that really just looks like he's sort of feathering the ball every single time and like really is throwing a catchable ball in tight spots to guys again and again and again and putting it right where he wants to do it. And I thought like, okay, like that's what I'm reminding myself of. This Michigan State game is so good you can't compare anything to it. 32 of 35 for 432 yards and 6 touchdowns.
Basically in one half.
Like just unbelievable. And on throws of 10 yards or more in that game, he was 10 of 11 on throws of 10 yards or more. And it's just like, this guy, it's not fair to compare Julian Sayin to that. And then I rewatched Julian Sayin against Penn State, and Julian Sayin in that game was 20 of 23 for 316 yards and 4 touchdowns. Not quite as gaudy with the numbers, but on throws of 10 yards or more, he was 9 for 9. And one of the
10
things,
yards or 20 yards.
10. So I was combining the top 2 measures on PFF. So like deep and intermediate, and then short and behind the line of scrimmage. So I lumped together the top 2. And then I was like, wait, okay, no, Julian Sayin did kind of get to that level. That because the thing I was thinking was, okay, CJ Stroud was ahead of Julian Sayin at the end of year 1, right? And I think you would say that based on how the season ended, I think you would say that. But the point is that I think CJ was playing his best at the end of the season. Michigan State, Michigan, Utah were his best. That wasn't Julian's best. Julian's best was in game 8 against Penn State, right? And then it kind of...
Yeah. He was pretty good against Michigan, I thought. Aside from the pick, he was good against Michigan.
He was. That's fair. So I do think, like, this isn't exactly the conversation, but how do you think, and you have a better memory than me, the CJ Stroud that threw 6 touchdown passes against Michigan State and went nuts against Utah, how do you think he would have done against Indiana and Miami?
Oh boy. Does he have Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jackson Smith and Jigba?
No, nobody has Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate.
Yeah, but perhaps not 100% versions of them, right? So I think that's the other thing. And the other thing that Julian had too is like they hit that stride. We've mentioned it before. They hit that stride against Penn State, and then he didn't have Carnell for basically the rest of the year until the Michigan game. And then he like didn't have a 100% version of Jeremiah probably for the rest of the year. And by the way, when those guys went out, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka weren't waiting to replace them.
Yep.
like they were in the Rose Bowl in 2021.
No offense to David Adolph. I know Emeka Egbuka.
We thought
Emeka Egbuka, David Adolph.
we thought maybe they were with Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham, but that wasn't the case. So yeah, I don't know. I mean that version of CJ was pretty dialed in. Like I think and I think there was like, not only was the player dialed in, but I think like the play caller was sort of like dialed in with what was working best for the quarterback too. So like he sort of had that relationship really cooking in a way that I don't think Ohio State had at the end of the season, end of the 2025 season either. So I think that version of CJ at the end of year 1 would have stood a significantly better chance probably of winning the playoff game this year if he were in.
But I also wonder if he just would have been swarmed under by the same things that Julian Sayin was kind of swarmed under by. You know,
maybe
that.
Yeah.
So we always said like CJ's thing is like solve the problem before it happens. I'm not going to evade this sack, but I'm going to check the protection, change the play, make sure I have my hot route ready, and get rid of the ball before Ruben Bain gets to me. I'm not going to spin away from the guy. Though then he did it. He did that at the end of year 2 against Georgia.
Did you watch the Michigan game?
No,
that year. I have not watched that in a while to know like. So
when Hutchinson and Ajabo and just like this is a little tough.
He had, I want to pull that up. So he had no scramble yards, no scrambles at all. -3 designed rushing yards. And in that game, he was pressured on almost 50% of his dropbacks.
Okay.
So like maybe that's the game we're talking about, right? Like you have Ojabo and Hutchinson are Bane and Mesidor. You couldn't block them. You couldn't block the Miami guys. CJ Stroud played well, had finished with a heck of a stat line, but maybe if you go watch that game where there are plays out there to be made that weren't made because he wasn't doing everything he could against the pressure. I don't know. I'm not saying that's definitely the case. I didn't go back and rewatch it, but maybe that could have been what happened.
Yeah. Scored 27 in that game, like had a couple touchdown drives late when you needed it to stay in the game, but that's a decent comparison. I did go through their first year as starters and try to just like statistically compare Julian Sayin and CJ Stroud on deep throws, what you're talking about, 20 yards or more down the field. CJ Stroud was 32 of 62. Julian Sayin was 31 of 50. So Stroud did a little more, but Sayin completed as many in fewer attempts because, as we talked about all year, Julian Sayin was so accurate on balls down the field. Sayin took 16 sacks. Stroud took 12. They both had only 11 scrambles their first year as a starter. CJ Stroud had 11 scrambles for 62 yards. Julian Sayin had 11 scrambles for 48 yards. So, they didn't really do it. Big time throws. CJ Stroud had 27. Julian Sayin had 23. Turnover-worthy plays. CJ Stroud had 12. Julian Sayin had 6. There is something within this, again, like the average depth of target. CJ Stroud was 10 yards. Julian Sayin was 8.7. And then their percent of throws that were at least 10 yards down the field. This was probably the biggest difference because so many of the other stats were similar. CJ Stroud, 41.3% of his throws were 10 yards or more down the field. Julian Sayin, it was 33.2%. So 8% more of his throws were kind of throws, right? And again, watching Michigan State, CJ in 2021, CJ Stroud's taking it down the field, no hesitation. And I was like, man, Julian Sayin needs to do that. And then I watched the Penn State game, and Julian Sayin was like, bang. I think he turned down one early, and then it was Tate down the field, Jeremiah Smith down the field. They're not wide open. They didn't run a perfect route, and they're not open by 10 yards, but he's giving his guys a shot. It was like, man, wait, no, this is it. He's doing this. But I do think generally CJ in year one was pushing it a little bit more, and I think willingly taking those things without hesitation. And again, if maybe you would say, well, 3 healthy first-round receivers would contribute to that. Julian had that for part of the year and then didn't at the back half of the year. Or maybe CJ was just a little bit ahead of Julian when it comes to that.
Yeah, I don't recall many, and maybe we had them, I'm just forgetting, the conversations we had this year about Julian where it was yeah, he played well. The numbers are great. He was super efficient, but he missed this, and this, right? There was more on the bone that he could have kind of left out there. And I don't know that CJ ever really kind of passed down, and maybe I'm misremembering, but I don't recall having conversations about him passing down opportunities for explosive plays or not even passing them down, but not seeing them, not pulling the trigger, whatever, however you want to characterize it.
Yeah,
and obviously that was an issue for Julian this year, including in the Miami game. There was more there in that game. Even given all the offensive issues, they still had opportunities to make a couple big plays. It didn't happen.
Other comparisons, their PFF grade when they had a clean pocket. CJ Stroud in year one in 2021, his grade was 93.7. Julian Sayin in year one in 2025, his grade was 94.4, so very similar. Their grades under pressure, CJ Stroud 67, Julian Sayin 67.1. The percent of time that they had a clean pocket, CJ Stroud 76.2% of the time, Julian Sayin 73.5% of the time. That means that Julian Sayin was pressured 26.5% of the time. CJ Stroud was pressured 23.8% of the time. This was the blitz rate, how often they were blitzed. Julian Sayin was blitzed 5% more of the time, 38% of the time instead of 34% of the time, 4% difference. This was the other thing that stood out, and I think this is just maybe shorter quarterback. This is what you do. The number of plays that were play action. And some of this might be just more of an RPO look too. Cause they count, if you fake it, fake an RPO handoff, they count that as play action, right? So
yeah. And Ohio State does a lot of sort of I don't even know the word, shotgun play action. That's hardly rises to the level of play action.
Right.
Yeah.
So Julian Sayin play action, 43% of his passes came out of play action. CJ Stroud 30, but I think like always it feels like, and this is just from like Brown stuff with Baker Mayfield, play action gives you a little bit of a chance for like a guy who's not quite as tall to maybe like do a thing which makes you sort of set your feet and survey. Whereas if you're just doing like a straight drop back out of shotgun so I think for a slightly smaller quarterback to have 13% more play action makes sense.
Yeah, I think well, what's interesting because I was looking at some of these numbers, and so I don't have play action rate necessarily because it's hard to break down via PFF because it's a little misleading. But like CJ's pass rates out of pistol and from under center, well, mostly just pistol, were higher than Julian's. No, they're both and under center. They're both higher. So CJ. Pistol pass rate, which for Ohio State is going to be predominantly play action pass, 26% in 2021, basically 22% in 2022, and Julian this year was 17%. So, almost a difference of 10 one year and 5 another year. And then under center, which again, if Ohio State's passing under center, it's more than likely play action pass. 2021 was 24%, 2022 was 22%, and again for Julian this year was more like 17%. So I actually like that's part of what I'm writing with the Arthur Smith thing. Is like they didn't do enough of it with Julian. They didn't move the pocket at all for him. you have a quarterback who's I think generously 6'1", especially now that we know that Diego Pavia is 5'9". And we saw those pictures of Julian standing next to him. Like you have to move the pocket a little bit for him, and they probably didn't do that enough. And I think that is probably part of the reason why Arthur Smith was attractive to Ryan Day, because he knows they need to do that more.
And just again, rewatching CJ's just back there at 6'4", taking a shotgun snap and just computing everything in the moment, and then just taking what's there, bang, and throwing an accurate ball. And it's just time after time after time. And I do think, and robotic is the wrong word, but there's sort of what would be the right word to like say that in a positive manner, that CJ is sort of like, I am diagnosing the defense. This is surgical. What is available. Surgical. Thank you. I don't know how much you want Julian Sayin to be surgical. I want CJ Stroud to be surgical. Give me all the receivers, give me enough time, and I'm going to kill you. Bang, 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 bang. But I think I want a little more flow and looseness to Julian Sayin.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's like primarily a size thing, right? I think you want there's like
size, athleticism, but also
the guys we call gunslingers are short, by the way.
Yes.
Who's a tall gunslinger?
I mean, I guess Brett Favre tall. Brett Favre was just
Favre's not that tall. Is he?
I don't know.
I thought Brett Favre was like 6'1".
But like Baker, I mean, and that's the thing too, is like so it is weird because I think Bryce Young is surgical. Bryce Young is poised, right? And I don't know that Bryce Young's a gunslinger. Well, I don't know. I can't pretend that I watched.
Brett Favre is 6'2".
I can't pretend that I watched all of. I think poise when I think Bryce Young. I don't think gunslinger. So we're kind of in between here now. It's like I think Bryce Young is a decent comparison for him.
He's scooting the throw.
He's scooty, poised and scooty. I've definitely used the word scooty to describe Bryce Young.
Because poise to me doesn't mean pocket necessarily.
No, but it just means that
is primarily like when you are outside of the pocket, are you in control of your body to like make the throws you need to make? And I think Julian very much is.
And when you are pressured, can you slide within the pocket or escape under control and keep your eyes downfield? That pressure doesn't blow you up. Pressure doesn't end the play. And so I think sometimes like you could like if you don't have to be poised if you're fast. It's like, hey, here comes pressure. And you're like, you're freaking out. But then you take off and run for 17 yards because you're fast and shifty and you have spin moves and you have stiff arms or whatever, right? But if you're poised, then maybe you're running the throw, but you're like Bryce Young was always looking downfield. So scooty, maneuverable. But I think bottom line, I want Julian Sayin playing looser than CJ Stroud. And that it was a little bit of a grind. I mean, it was a 2-year grind to get CJ Stroud to his triumphant in defeat game against Georgia, where he finally kind of played in a way he'd never played before. I think Julian can more naturally get to that and play that way and break sacks and throw on the run, because I don't have an expectation that Julian at his best will be quite as surgical as CJ Stroud was, because I'm not sure you're ever going to see a college quarterback be as surgical as CJ Stroud was when he's throwing the first round receivers and just absolutely picking defenses apart.
Yeah, I mean, I do think Julian is as accurate as CJ. And at times maybe slightly more accurate. I think there's a, and I think Julian does process things quickly. Like I don't think that's like a whatever misnomer about him that we think he does, but he actually doesn't. But I do think there are times where maybe his size is a little limiting, and perhaps he's not able to process everything because he frankly like can't see it or whatever. But if you think about like some of his best throws this year, like he's not. Even like the one, the Carnell Tate, right? Like there's pressure. He drifts a little bit. He gains some depth in the pocket. The couple of deep shots against Penn State are off of play action where he's moving a little bit. Like he's like you don't have to run him out to the sideline, but you get him off the spot just a touch to allow him to see a little more. And then he's got all the tools to get the ball down the field and do so accurately and hit guys where he needs to. I just think when he's like kind of hanging in the pocket a little bit, he, his decision making drifts a little bit, I think, and like not in a way that it's like this guy doesn't know what he's doing, but in a way that's noticeable just because like a lot of the time it's really good. So like anytime he makes a mistake, you're sort of like, well, where did that come from? But I think I don't know. I think he's got just about everything that people would sort of like hope he taps into next year, aside from if like he's not going to add 25 pounds and grow 3 inches. And like, I don't think he's going to run a QB draw and run over a defender on the 2-yard line, but I don't know that that's what Ohio State definitely needs from him in order for him to take the next step and for Ohio State to get back to, playing for a national championship or at least advancing farther than it did this past season. But like the other stuff, the play extension, the scrambling, playmaking, I think like just sort of generally, is in there. There's just too much. There's evidence last season. There's evidence in his high school tape. I think there's enough if you talk to people who've played with him and worked with him and played against him. There's just too much evidence for me to think that he doesn't have that. It's just a matter of can he make the leap into tapping into it more consistently in his second year.